Hello and welcome to MySecurityTV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Covage. I'm the Executive Editor with MySecurity Media, and this is our Friday morning episode. And we're going to be joined, I don't know how I'm going to segue these two particular interviews together, but we're going to be joined by Declan Sullivan, who's been writing for the Australian Strategic Policy Institute on tank technology. And the question is, Australia's new tanks are overkill and overweight. Is this a necessary purchase? But it's certainly an interesting domain for us to dive into in terms of tank technology and the advancements in military technology as well. Let's bring on Declan Sullivan, who's been writing for ASPI, or the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Declan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Good man. And tanks, and this sparked my interest. You wrote a very interesting piece looking at military tank technology. Australia's recent sort of announcement that they're going to be coming out and spending, was it 150 million? How much were they going to be spending?
Oh, billions, yeah.
Billions,
yeah.
Sorry, there you go. That was one segue I had with our upcoming cybersecurity segment, was that's $8 million. That's small change when we're talking about military technology. Australia's new tanks are overkill and overweight. Maybe introduce us to yourself. We haven't had you on before, and then we'll dive into the background to this particular article.
So I have a master's degree in strategic studies and in American law. I've been researching defence studies, both Australian defence and American defence for going on a decade.
Yeah.
I've written for the ASPI, as you said, and as well as the National Interest, and I've been published on a study on counterterrorism as well as smallpox in comparison to Australian and American histories. I've also written extensively on armoured warfare.
Okay, and that's kind of where I wanted to move to, is when I read the article. The tank is one of those things. And Peter Dean and Malcolm Davis has also written on this particular topic, and there's a bit of reference to an article by Greg Sheridan as well, who's kind of highlighting that are tanks really necessary in new or upcoming warfare? If we look at some of the risks that we face in the Indo-Pacific region and who our adversaries are and what type of war or conflict, military conflict, we will be facing. Maybe just your general thoughts. Let's just dive into it, where you wanted to start. What's the main premise of this? Is that they're overkill and overweight. Just pre-interview, I raised, I'm hearing a lot about our amphibious capabilities, and that sounds good. We're on an island, and across Southeast Asia, we're going to need amphibious capability, but these tanks are too heavy, so they're just going to be landlocked here in Australia. Is that right?
That's the concern. So when we first bought the HMAS Canberra, and as well as the Adelaide, our new heavy landing ships, they came with ship-to-shore, smaller ship-to-shore capabilities. We were told by, I believe the producer was Navantia, a Spanish company, that it would take a single Abrams to be able to ship from the Canberra or the Adelaide to shore. When we actually tested it, the small landing ship nearly sunk with the Abrams in it. They have since been, I think, refining that. I'm not sure what Defence has done in terms of getting that to work, but as of literally 2 weeks ago, they have tested it as part of exercise Sea Explorer, where they have successfully landed an Abrams tank by sea. I don't know the details. I don't know if that was a fully capable Abrams tank, if they've stripped maybe the ammunition out or done something else. But that's very recent, and I'm not, having done the research, I'm not convinced that we could maybe do it in a contested environment. You have the possibility that while the landing ships can carry the tanks from the Canberra or the Adelaide to shore, they might not be able to do it in rough seas or at speed.
Yep. Just to clarify, it was $2.5 billion upgrade to the fleet. We'll see 75 M1 Abrams tanks replaced. I suppose what were the options that we had and then how would they have fitted into our sort of defence posture? Is this just repeating the same of what we've had, and it's an easy decision? Is it time-based? Why would defence be making what appears to be a strategically poor decision?
That's kind of the big question. It's so this is to some extent it's an upgrade. So we've had the M1 Abrams tank from America since about 2007 as our main fleet. They're fantastic tanks. I have to say that they are probably the best main battle tank in the world right now. They were originally developed in the 1980s by the Americans. It's just the M1. They've since done subsequent upgrades. They've improved. One of the first things they did was improve the cannon. There've been further upgrades to the armor since then. So we are now the current model that the Americans are using. Their latest version is called the M1A2 SEP V3.
Yep.
That's what we are getting.
Who's making these, by the way? Who's the company?
I believe it's No, sorry, not General Dynamics. Sorry, you've caught me out.
Sorry to put you on the notice. I was thinking it's not Lockheed or anyone. They don't. No,
it was because there was a debate over this. It's Chrysler.
Chrysler, okay.
Yeah, well, the original manufacturers, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And where I suppose this, apart from their weight and what is there anything about their capability that doesn't match as well? I mentioned Malcolm Davis, Peter Dean writing, and we've spoken to Malcolm previously as well about sort of drone swarms, drone technology. There's a good article that he writes that's linked in. So I've put the link in the notes here out already in terms to your article. There's some links out to Malcolm's article as well. Whereas the artillery, the cost of the artillery versus the sort of $100,000 drones that are going to be coming, that it's going to be up against. That's the overkill, isn't it? It's like, are we looking at advanced technology like drones and the like, and robotics and the others, versus what these tanks will be up against? What's the cut rate there?
So this seems to be the main problem that defence is having right across the board in terms of platforms, is they're picking the traditional option. It's like, oh, we'll get more of these tanks, the next version, because that's what we already have.
Yeah, right.
They're not looking beyond that in terms of lighter models. When we first purchased the M1 in 2007, that was really a choice that we needed to upgrade our old fleet of Leopards. And there was a debate at the time, did we even need tanks? They decided we did. But there wasn't anything else on the market. So there really wasn't another, like a lighter option if we wanted it. Now we're in a position where, okay, we're going to upgrade the fleet. We have other options. There are lighter options. There are more flexible options for us. So again, that comes back to the point about artillery or any other defense platform, is, are we looking beyond what we've been using for the last 50 years?
Yep.
Are we saying, instead of getting another heavy artillery piece, maybe get a swarm of drones that are cheaper or more suitable?
And it's also that sovereign capability as well. Like, what if all the tanks get taken out? We got nothing left. We can't even make them here. So, and it's going to take them a while to get here. Whereas, drone swarms and others, we could potentially be making on our own with a sovereign capability. One of the reasons I took interest in this, we do obviously cover off on defence, but it's the age-old question of technology. When you're faced with adversaries, you're faced with risk, and then you've got technology platforms that are, becoming obsolete, whereas also being replaced with new. The options are expanding. Which way do you go? And I suppose the big thing here with defence is, as we pointed out at the start, the amount of money involved. We're already questioning sort of the submarine, which was, I can't even remember how much that is now, but it started at 50 billion, but now it's 70, 80, 90 billion. These are big errors to make, and a lot there. But from what I'm seeing from ASPI, there's no one on board with this other than maybe the tank fraternity that are a bit parochial in their thinking anyway. What's the update? This was kind of all happening in June, this discussion, and here we are sort of early July. Has there been any update? Is there any final decision made on this?
No. So I suspect that Defence were not prepared for the amount of interest, let's say, there was going to be in their decision. It's notable that there wasn't an announcement made, at least initially, that they were making this purchase. The Australian media found out generally because the Americans have to make a declaration that they're selling their military equipment to when they sell it to foreign countries. It was that information that came out in Australia, not that there was no announcement, oh, Australia's getting new tanks.
Right.
I'd like to make the point that the debate there seems to be between people like Greg Sheridan, who are asking, do we need tanks, which, like I said, was asked sort of in 2007 as well. You have people on the other side of the debate like Jim Molan, who contends, yes, we do need tanks. What is not being discussed as much that I can see is the question of, okay, if we need tanks, do we need these tanks?
Yeah.
And my position is, no, we do need tanks. We don't need these tanks.
Well, they weren't deployed in Afghanistan,
No,
but,
no.
and I think that's a big question to ask, is our longest war, we didn't even use them. So, you've got to ask the question, why not? And it took a while for the Americans, I understand, to use theirs. But
Yep.
Is that related to this discussion as well? Is it not relevant that we haven't been using them? So why are we getting a new fleet? And then the question of the fleet doesn't even look like it's fit for purpose for the future. What's your thoughts around the history of tanks, just recent history, obviously, but with Afghanistan?
So with Afghanistan, and I'd speak a little bit before that as well, we didn't deploy the Leopards either. Our last deployment of tanks overseas was to the Vietnam War,
right.
which was the model before the Leopards. The decision to not deploy in Afghanistan, at least for us, was partly dominated by, I think, deploying those tanks they're heavy assets. It would have been difficult. It would have meant a new supply line that we had to maintain, new logistics, that kind of thing. It also wasn't immediately apparent to both Australia and America and other countries of what use these kinds of heavy tanks are going to be in a counterinsurgency operation. There is, or it continues to be, a strong impression that when you deploy tanks, that's an escalatory action. There is this implicit psychological bias against using tanks unless you're in a real war.
Right.
It's worth talking about the Canadian and Danish experience, because the Canadians, when they deployed to Afghanistan, found themselves without any sort of armoured capability at all. They were actually in the process of decommissioning their entire tank corps. They were using old Leopards like we were, and they had made the decision, we're not going to use tanks anymore. They turned that around. They were literally pulling tanks out of, they'd given a few to museums. Apparently they were pulling them out of the museums right. To send them to Afghanistan. And once they arrived, they found, and the Danes had a similar experience, that they were extremely useful, but not as how tanks have been, say, traditionally used since the end of World War II as sort of these fast, mobile breakthrough units. But rather their sensor capabilities and the range on their guns was much better than anything else they had. The other advantage is if you're an infantry unit on the ground, it is far easier to coordinate your actions with the tank or other sort of similar armored capabilities than it is with an air asset, even a drone. So even if they weren't shooting, they were able to sort of sit them out the front of the base and see everything around them with these improved optics. The other thing that they found is that rather than being an escalatory measure or an intimidation tactic against the local population, seen as oppressive, local population in Afghanistan really liked having the tanks there because it made them feel safe.
Yep.
So that was once the Taliban realized they had nothing that could penetrate the tanks, they stayed away from them. So
it is a show of force, isn't it? Really, at the end of the day. And other than all you've got is a sort of an APV, which is just a a small truck, a tank has a sound to it as well. Like you can almost feel them coming.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things I wanted to touch on as well of the other technology that's coming over the top of, say, the traditional warfare, and you mentioned how tanks have traditionally been used, and their capability was at the forefront at the end of World War II, and now it looks like they're falling back. But it does seem that they will always have a purpose. We may end up being sort of a frontline warfare at some point, and who knows, it might be on Australian soil, particularly up in the north. The one thing that, and I think it's Peter Dean, it could be Malcolm, I'll put the link in, but the two major technological and operational changes in military power is being applied. And one is that land-based air power, and then the other one is developments in amphibious warfare, ships, craft and operations. And then we've also got the long range. This is kind of the next one coming, is the long range land-based missiles and hypersonic missiles, which will, could potentially take out tank fleets and the like. And then we also mentioned on the drone swarms. So where does all that kind of fit in? And there's a question coming, Declan, I'm sure, but I wanted to cover off on that. And the Army has broken it down to sort of Land 8113 and Land 8710. These are all kind of coded capabilities, right, in terms of what's happening. And then we've got unmanned tanks and tanks that will launch drones. The ones that we're looking at, these Abrams A2s, do they have that capability to be unmanned?
No, not currently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what about
not
drones?
Not the ones we're buying.
Right. Okay. Well, that's weird because the defence are undergoing their autonomous program, aren't they? They're Army personnel carriers and the like. They're all making them unmanned. Why wouldn't they be buying unmanned tanks?
That's a good question. So the model we're buying definitely can't. It's highly unlikely that further upgrades made by the Americans to the current Abrams model will ever be unmanned. The Americans are developing several different armored platforms, including a lighter one, that will be unmanned, or at least capable of being unmanned. The Russians, with their latest tank, they are apparently developing an unmanned model of that. The Europeans, the French and Germans, are combining to develop a future main battle tank for their armies, which will have some unmanned capability, as well as you said, apparently the ability to launch drones, although that is very much still on the drawing board. The British have recently done a half step with their Challenger tanks, where rather than replacing their fleet of Challenger 2s, they've made major upgrades to their existing chassis to put new guns on them, new electronics, all that. The new electronics, part of that is new networking, with the intention of potentially down the line making these tanks at least partially unmanned, or giving them maybe that capability. Tanks to some extent are in a bit of, as I said in the article, in a bit of a quagmire right now, in terms of what they are as a platform. And part of it is this their historic use as fast breakthrough units since the start of World War II and through. The problem is that missile technology, drone technology, and that kind of thing has advanced to such an extent that tanks are less and less survivable in that kind of high-intensity conventional combat environment, because they're being hit by guided missiles from over the horizon that they have no capability to defend themselves from. We recently saw in Armenia and Azerbaijan, where the admittedly quite old Armenian tanks were just being wiped off the map by drones and what are called loitering munitions, which are essentially rockets that hang in the air and suicide themselves on whatever they see below. These loitering munitions and drones that are used by the Azeris was just devastating to the Armenian tank corps. And it's worth pointing out that they're much cheaper than throwing tanks into the fight. It's not clear what effect that will have internationally on the way we look at tanks. Do we put in more electronic defenses onto tanks to try and scatter, to interfere with those drones? Do we start putting? We currently have a trophy. It's called the Trophy Active Protection System. It's a new type of defense system that's being fitted to tanks, including our new Abrams models. It's designed to detect incoming rockets and missiles and fire essentially a shotgun blast at the incoming projectile to destroy it before it hits the tank. It's effective against guided missiles or small rockets, that kind of thing. It's designed by the Israelis to combat against RPGs and that kind of thing. The potential there is, well, do we design or bring in new types of that kind of system, which are designed to shoot down incoming missiles from above?
But it's always going to have, if you're a remote tank, you're always going to have a limitation on that defense tech or the defense capability. And eventually when it runs out, these drones, as you say, suicide drones, it's...
they can put more drones in the air than we can put tanks.
Correct.
On the ground. Yeah. It's the potential is that in the long term we will see a tank much like the European models will likely be, where they're highly networked. They may have some sort of AI-assisted targeting to select targets in the field, that kind of thing, as well as they are able to launch drones themselves, and the tank becomes less of a moving gun and much more of a moving network center, where it's coordinating with drones and infantry units and other assets. The next step there is to completely take the gun off and say, here is an armored protection network node that moves around in the field. Yeah. It's connected to drones in the sky, as well as smaller tanks, which again are lighter, so they can go different places, that kind of thing, which are completely unmanned. And one may be the gun, one may be a node. You might have others which are designed to protect them from attacks from above. All those kind of.
I'd imagine they should also carry their own drone swarm as well, you know, in terms of countering other drones. And again, this is where it comes into the future of warfare. It becomes, it becomes a video game really at the end of the day in terms of what you can see. Maybe let's finish off with the future of warfare and the likes of, say, an adversary like China. And I think this is part of the argument raised is our next conflict will be maritime based and obviously Navy focused. Is this something that maybe that is the focus for the defence, and that this is just another purchase that they just have to fit with the force posture review and the budget that they have? They haven't got the time or the resources to be thinking about the tanks at the moment, and just upgrade those. We've got other bigger issues to focus on.
That could. I'll give defence the benefit of the doubt and say maybe there is a good reason why they've chosen these tanks. They haven't given one. No one I've read has been able to figure out why they've done this. It's $2.5 billion, so it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money, really.
Compared to the submarines, no.
That's our segue. It's going to be our segue to you, Phil. We've got $8 million to talk about. These guys are talking $2.5 billion. So, cybersecurity will never catch up. I've got Phil Rodriguez on shortly, but look, Declan, I think we'll have you on again. When I looked at with Malcolm Davis and Peter Dean, I'd like to have you all three on, and we'll talk about sort of the future of warfare. You three, I'm sure, over a beer, I'm sure, think about some amazing things.
It'll be a good conversation.
Yeah, but a bit scary too for some of us. But look, thank you so much for that. I've put the link in the show notes there. I'll put a couple of links out to Peter Dean and Malcolm Davis's article, just in case if Malcolm does watch. We'll have you on shortly for a space episode. He's good on all sorts of things, Malcolm. But Declan, thank you so much. If anyone wants to reach out to Declan, how can they get hold of you, mate? What's the best way? Via ASPI?
Via ASPI, yep.
Good work. All right. And otherwise, that article is there. So Declan Sullivan, he's just been writing with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Let me just bring this up for you. Australia's new tanks are overkill and overweight. Is this a necessary purchase? This is a question worth asking, and particularly in the current risk environment. Thank you so much, Declan. I'll put you backstage, and a pleasure. And we'll release this out as an individual interview as well.
Thank you for having me.
Good on you, mate. Have a good day.